Guys, welcome to Production Room. I'm here with Chris from Novation. Welcome to our Emporium of Synth. We're here today to look at Bass Station II, and we thought we'd start off by going back some years, back to 93 when Bass Station I came out, exactly. And in 95 when Bass Station Rack came out, and just ask with the obvious question, what's the difference?
What's the key differences? Right, well, yeah, I mean, you're right, it's 21 years or thereabouts when the original Bass Station came through. And, it was the single most requested product or revisit of a Novation product. Last year was very much the year of the analog mono synth, and it was the perfect time really for us to come along with Bass Station II. So really we've kind of taken the original kind of infrastructure, if you like, of the Bass Station, but brought it sort of kicking and screaming into the 21st century. So, I mean, it's following the same kind of architecture. We've got two oscillators.
Yeah.
Bass Station II, we've added the sub-oscillator on there as well. The sub-oscillator did originally appear on the Super Bass Station,
right?
But obviously it's a really worthwhile thing to put it onto Bass Station 2 as well. So the sub-oscillator is pretty much tracking oscillator 1.
Right.
It's an octave or 2 octaves below. We've added new waveforms to this one as well. So now we have a choice of sine wave, triangle, sawtooth, and square as well. With the square wave, we also have pulse width, and we can modulate that with LFO and a modulation envelope, which we could do on the original as well. And we've also added a couple of other things as well. For example, we've got an external input, which we can fire other signals through the Bass Station.
Okay. And where does that route to?
Right. So the external input is basically it's fed in at the mixer point here. We've got an external input. Volume control here.
Yeah.
Once that's in, then that is passed through the filter section and then through the effects section. So, we're passing an external signal through the analog filters, through the analog effects.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we've got all our modulation that we can use to apply to that filtered effect as well.
Right. One of the big questions we get asked, Chris, all the time, because part of this new series we're doing is very much getting our Facebook channel and our Twitter channel, which is huge, to throw some questions to you guys. So opposed to you just taking us through the usual,
absolutely,
you get asked questions that the customer actually wants to know and the user actually wants to know.
Perfect.
You mentioned about the filters, about the external section being driven through the filters.
Yeah.
Obviously there's two filters on there.
Yeah.
Primary differences are?
Right, okay, well the filter section, you're quite right. Again, this is a slight difference from the original Bass Station. We've actually applied sort of new filter technology to the Bass Station. We have two distinct filters, so we have a choice of one or the other.
Yeah.
The first one is the classic filter. Now this is the filter that was originally designed, well, it was on the original Bass Station, but working further back from that, it was actually on the EDP Wasp as well.
Right.
We're very lucky at Novation. We've got a chap called Chris Huggett who works with us on the synth design, and he's an absolute legend in British synthesizer design. I mean, he was the guy behind the EDP stuff, so Wasp and those sorts of things. And also, he was the main guy on the Oscar as well.
Right.
So, he's got exactly. I mean, it's really nice to have somebody of that kind of, legendary status working on this.
So is it fair to say that as a non-Novation employer, I can say realistically we're looking like a 303 filter and a classic filter that's more of an acid filter? Is that
right? Well, I mean, again, if we think back to what the Bass Station was in the day, at that point the 303 wasn't really in production. They were becoming few and far between, and so the Bass Station became a great way for people to get those sort of acid bass sort of sounds.
Yes.
Now, it was never designed to be a 303 clone, but it's just that people decided or found that they could actually get that sort of sound out of the Bass Station. So, we've got the original classic filter on there, which, does deliver in the same way, but we've added this extra filter, the acid filter, as we called it.
Right.
Now, this is a new design filter for specifically for Bass Station. It's a diode ladder filter, and really is there to give you that kind of that more acidy bass sort of sound. It's a very nice kind of rich, and especially when it's run through the distortion. It's like your classic 303.
And these are both true analog.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, one thing I should say, obviously, about Bass Station is that all of the signal is true analog.
Great.
The control on Bass Station is digital. So again, this is kind of a new thing in terms of what we've got, because now we have the best of both worlds.
Right.
You know, we've got the stability of digitally controlled oscillators.
Yes, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
the DCO, it's still a true analog signal that's coming from them, but you know, the clocking of them is so tight that they don't, you know, they're not kind of, you don't have to turn it on, go make a cup of tea and wait for it to warm up.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. Or
there,
spend 2-3 hours trying to tune them.
Yeah,
Anything
exactly.
Like that. Yeah,
exactly.
And I'm guessing you mentioned about them being digitally controlled. So with regards, another question that we get asked a lot, with regards to all the pots and the sliders, what's actually transmitted over USB stroke MIDI?
Right, again, you know, Novation, we make synthesizers, we also make controllers, and we're not going to pass up a chance to actually, you know, incorporate the two. Exactly, yeah. So the really nice thing about Bass Station is that every single pot on here is also kicking out a CC message. Well, apart from the sequencer side of things here, but all of the parameter control of the synthesizer is putting out a CC message.
Right,
but in a really quite a clever way, I think, as well. For example, here we've got our oscillator section, and in the oscillator section we have 5 discrete controls here for the various aspects of the oscillator.
Yeah.
But of course it's 2 oscillators. Now, it's a 25-note keyboard, it's on a small format, so we have a switch here which allows you to choose between oscillator 1 and oscillator 2.
Yeah.
So we have 5 CC messages coming from this section here on oscillator 1. If I switch over here, we've got another 5. So, but it gets better. there's more. Because, you know, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 controls here. And then we get to the pulse width. Now, again, to save sort of real estate on the top panel here, we've actually got a switch. So we can control the amount of pulse width, control the amount of modulation envelope controlling the pulse width with the switch set here. We have a manual control. And again, we can control the amount of LFO2 controlling the pulse width. So this particular knob here actually has 3 functions.
Right.
So if we add all of this up in this small section here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 CCs
on both oscillators,
and then switch the oscillator. We've got 14 controls just here.
Great.
That's an absolute ton of controls.
That answers the question beautifully.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same here in the mixer, you know. When we get down to our external mixer input, we've also got ring modulation, volume control, noise generator volume control as well. So another 3 positions for this.
Amazing.
So, you know, we've got a heck of a lot of controller capability from this. It's an analog synth, you know. That's its primary function. You know, it's almost that it's a happy accident that it's a really, really strong controller as well.
I mean, we all love the concept of true analog and the lack of flashing lights and presets, but in the real world, taking photographs of the front panel of your synth and then getting them out on stage to try and get it all to line up isn't the greatest set of circumstances.
Well, no, you're absolutely right, Paul. I mean, you know, I'm the proud owner of an ARP 2600.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. An SH101 as well, you know. You know, they're both CV controlled synths and they're beautiful instruments. But if I could have a MIDI output on both of those, or MIDI input on both of those, and maybe a USB connection, you know,
life would be much more
straightforward. It
straightforward.
would be so much more straightforward.
That brings me on to a wonderful question. So you, as without your Novation t-shirt on, which I know we're not really supposed to do, obviously you've got a couple of nice toys there. Have you tried to throw those through the external inputs and have some fun with the filters and the effects?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you know, Bass Station has got the external input on the back there. The external input is controlled by a volume control here. And then that is passed on into the filters and through the effects. Now you can get some really nice stuff going. I mean, it's, you know, it's almost like a little filter bank here that we've got going. You know, on the filters, you know, we were talking about the 2 different types. On the classic mode of filter, we've got a low pass, band pass, and high pass. Right. Which again is a difference from the original Bass Station. We've now got a 3 sort of position multi-mode filter. We've got 2 cut-off systems as well. We've got 24 dB per octave, 12 dB per octave. And so so you can actually take an external input through here, pass it through the filter, pass it through the distortion and the oscillator filter modulation, or sort of frequency modulation style effect as well. You can get some brilliant effects.
How does that work with the 2600 then?
Oh, it's very, very nice indeed.
Hard to make it sound bad in the first place.
Exactly,
but
no, that's it. I mean, with the filter that's in there already, you know, it's a pretty tasty filter, and then but then to run it through the second filter, you know, it's brilliant.
So one question that gets asked us quite a bit that we felt and our guys felt was a little bit out there was the concept of having the amp and mod as a combination on the envelope section. Opposed to just your straight amp control of ADSR and your mod control of ADSR. What was the thinking behind that?
Okay, right. Well, the first thing to say is, you know, it's a it's a small format synth. You know,
Yeah.
we've got a limited amount of, you know, to use the term real estate, but you know, we don't have, you know, we've only got a finite amount of space on there. And also, you know, you've got to bear in mind it's a 25 note keyboard here, and the beauty of working on a synth like this, it's a mono synth, is, you know, you play with one hand and you control with the rest. So you know, if we'd have put an extra octave on there, perhaps that would have been, you know, would have given us more space for the controls, but you know, we wanted to keep it into a small format. So you know, we had to work out a way of being able to access both envelopes, because we've got the amplifier envelope, we've got the modulation envelope. Out of interest, you know, the amp envelope is obviously controlling the volume. Modulation can control the pitch of the oscillator, the filter as well. We've got modulation envelope for the filter, and also for pulse width, for your square wave stuff. So with that in mind, we've plumbed for this kind of, you know, very similar to what we've got with the oscillator section here. You move between oscillator 1 and 2, and it's the same with the envelope really. So we have an amp envelope at the top, modulation envelope there as well, and then we've put this little interesting thing in here, the combined feature. And I actually find this really useful, specifically if I'm working on an initialized sound, I'm building a sound up from scratch. And what I do is I actually switch down to the combination there and just bring them all down like that, so I know that both envelopes are kind of initialized. Then what I'd do is I'd bring up the sustain, so I know that for the amp envelope I've got the sustain on, so the signal's either going to be on or off when I'm playing a key. Then I'd maybe bring it up to the mod envelope, bring the sustain down, and now I've got a centered modulation envelope, and I can then start to play around with the attack and the decay, you know, for my filter or pulse width.
It's a clever concept, It
is, but you know, we were talking before about the CC controls as well. This, I think, is a very, very interesting concept that we've got on Bass Station here, and I don't know of anything else that'll actually do this. I mentioned before that each of these has their own CC message. So the amp envelope, we now have 4 faders for CC. The mod envelope, again, we've got an extra 4 faders there, which are putting out their own CC message. Interestingly, when you go to the combined, these faders are now sending out 2 CC messages. So it's like a hardware macro control.
Amazing.
Which, as I say, I don't know of any other sort of system that can actually, you know, specifically do that just by switching to the 2 there. So yeah, I mean, it might seem a little unusual initially that we've got, you know, a switchable kind of amplifier.
Yeah, it's a different
envelope
it's
section.
very clever.
But
I understand where you're coming.
Okay,
Okay, right. And again, the final question before we roll it up for the day was very much about the step sequencer.
Yeah, of course.
How it works. And how you, in your wonderful world, might throw other things like walled-off pulses or you know, outside the table, or you know, whether it be Arturia gear, how they would integrate, or your it's 2600. So
absolutely.
How does this work for you, and how do you use it?
Okay, well, the first thing to say is that the step sequencer will send out MIDI data. So the arpeggiator and the step sequencer send it out as MIDI. The MIDI either comes out from USB or from its MIDI 5-pin MIDI ports that we've got on the back. So if you have a MIDI-enabled, you know, additional piece of hardware, then you can use the Bass Station sequencer to control that.
What do you use?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm quite a big fan of Electron gear as well.
Don't buy one thing anymore. Buy lots of little things.
It's a little modular system in its own way. I actually use Bass Station quite a lot with that, and what I will do is, for example, with the Octatrack, I would just essentially have a MIDI trigger to start off a sequence. So I know it's going to be bang on in time. Great thing is that the MIDI will MIDI or USB, if there's clock going in via those, this will lock onto it, so it will, you know, it will sync up with the external equipment. And then what I do is I just have all my samples and stuff on the Octatrack, sort of doing that side of things, and I'll use the sequencer here to actually take care of the Bass Station sort of performance duties as well. And again, you know, what happens is then we can program in a little sequence here. Well, in fact, we can program in 4 sequences. We have 4 separate slots there to program in the sequences. And that means I'm not actually, you know, having to do the performance bit on the keys. I can just get on to playing and tweaking the sounds, which is for me the most fun part, I think. But the sequence is very clever. I mean, you know, we've got our arpeggiator section, so you've got your standard up and down and up, and all that sort of stuff. We've got a nice one here as well, which is played. This will follow the order of the notes that you play in as an arpeggiator. But then if we go to the record section here, we access the sequencer engine. And it's just a simple case of, you know, just tapping the note, so like so. Let's put another one in to make it a nice round 8. Go up to play, and now when the arpeggiator is turned on. We have latch on as well. You just hit the play button. You know, okay, we didn't do much on the sound design there for it, but you know. But the point is that it's going to follow.
Yeah.
But the really nice thing is as well, we've also got the ability to use legatos and rests. So it's kind of similar to the old kind of Roland style of step sequencing on the SH, for example, where you can actually tie notes onto the next note to make a sustained note. We can also put rests or breaks in the sequence there as well, and that allows us to build up, you know, kind of rhythms and add rhythm to the sequence. So that's a really nice thing. The other thing that I should say as well is that we have a rhythm control here, and this is, again, it's quite unique really. We've got 32 separate types of rhythm available.
Right.
If I switch it all the way over to 32, we're going to be playing in straight 16ths.
Right.
If we set it all the way over to 1, we're going to be playing in straight crotchets or quarter notes, if you like. And then we've got variants in between, so we have different rhythmic patterns that can be applied to the sequence. So it really kind of just opens up the possibility. You know, you can put in a very straightforward 16th based sequence, and then start to get really, you know, clever with the rhythms and get different rhythmic sections out of it. So you know, it's a really, really well configured sequencer. As I say, if you've got any MIDI instruments connected, or if you want to control maybe your VST instruments through it as well, you know, you can just fire that out of the USB MIDI or through the actual MIDI and control those. There's another couple of really nice things I should say, because you know we've not mentioned it yet, but across the top of the keyboard here, we've got a whole load of additional control stuff, including, for example, we've got swing, so we can apply swing to the sequence as well, just to get that nice groove, that nice sort of rolling feel with it. So, you know, the sequencer itself has, you know, it's got a lot of scope, and, you know, that, as I say, that frees up your hands from playing, and so you can start to do what this synth does best, in my opinion, and that's really start to play and tweak around the sound.
I mean, we're all about alternative workflows. That's really the way forward for us. We love the fact that it's not just about living inside the DAW. We love the fact that there's new DAWs coming out that potentially kind of open the brain and make you work and think in different ways and create music in different ways. And with the concept of more step sequences and products like Electron and other products coming out like Beat Step, things that are just a little bit different, we tend to find that we believe that that kind of expands people's minds from a synthesis and a music creation point of view.
I think it's quite an incredible time to be sort of making music at the minute.
It really is. Amazingly, in the last 3 years as well. It's all happened.
Absolutely. No, that's it. I mean, you know, all of these new kind of methods of working, they just kind of open up a new direction for the way that you work.
Exactly.
You know, for me, step sequencing is a big deal. It's a big part of what I do now personally, and you know, it just is. I mean, what I found is when I was working on a computer, for example, you know, it's great. These things are incredible. You know, the amount of stuff that you can do on here is absolutely incredible. But I find that you kind of get very, very stuck into the kind of the detail aspect of things. And, you know, with a busy lifestyle, sometimes you just want an immediacy from things. And step sequencing just gives you that straight away. But also, you stumble across so many happy accidents and just these little things that just make you think, yeah, that's brilliant. I'm gonna go with that. That's kind of, you know, I've created the basis of my track just by stumbling across doing that. So, you know, I think it is. You're absolutely right, Paul. I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be working with this sort of thing.
Well, guys, we're going to wind it up there with the classic statement: happy accidents. And thank Chris from Novation. And guys, please, if you're in our area, in the Leeds area, or in the UK, get down to the store and check out the Bass Station II. Pretty amazing. Don't just sit and listen to it on its own. Plug everything else into it and just get creative with your workflow. Thanks, Chris.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.